Hello, my name is Jacob Huggins. I'm a third year psychology and criminology student, and my presentation today will be focused on the rights of women. More specifically, I'll be addressing the very real and very controversial topic, which is the existing worldwide gender pay gap between men and women. Okay, so here I provided an outline of what will be covered throughout my presentation. So firstly, we'll take a look at human rights and gender equality and establish what they are and how they can be achieved. Then we'll discuss what a gender pay gap actually is. So here I'll provide a clear definition and some relevant statistics. Next, we'll take a look at the pay gap on both a national and an international scale, so we'll compare Australia to the rest of the world. Next, I'll provide reasons as to why a gender pay gap exists and the effects that one has on the economy, the workplace, and society as a whole. We'll then discuss whether women are likely to be catered for by the state, so whether or not women are ever likely to be repaid, or whether the gender pay gap will ever actually close. After that, we'll examine whether the gender pay gap is an issue as shaped by the United Nations and the certain responses that they have towards an existing gender pay gap. Next, we'll talk about the benefits of closing the gap, and then we'll take a look at powerful women in contemporary societies who challenge existing stereotypes. Before finishing up with the activity, we'll take a look towards the future and ask what should be done in order to abolish the gender pay gap. What are human rights? Well, human rights recognize the value of each person and our relationship with our surroundings. They are based on mutual respect and help identify certain standards regarding the quality of life that we as humans can expect to enjoy. Human rights are widely considered to have the following three qualities. Firstly, human rights are inherent, meaning that human rights do not have to be given to us. They are our birthright and belong to us simply because we exist as human beings. Secondly, human rights are inalienable, meaning that human rights cannot be taken away from us under any circumstances. And lastly, human rights are universal, meaning that human rights belong to everyone, regardless of sex, race, colour, religion, nationality. None of it matters. Women's rights are human rights. Due to some social structures, traditions, stereotypes, and attitudes about women and their role in society, women do not always have the opportunity and ability to access and enforce their rights on the same basis as men. Gender equality is at the very heart of human rights. However, women around the world continue to be discriminated against on the basis of gender. Gender equality can be achieved when both men and women alike are able to access and enjoy the same rewards, the same resources, and the same opportunities. Many countries across the globe, Australia included, have made significant advancements towards achieving gender equality in recent decades, particularly in areas such as education. However, women continue to earn less than men, are less likely to advance their working careers as far as men, and are more likely to be financially disadvantaged in their final years. There are simple actions that workplaces can undertake in order to promote gender equality in the workplace. Firstly, workplaces need to provide equal pay for women and men for work of equal or comparable value. Barriers need to be removed so that women and men alike are granted access to all occupations and industries, including high-profile leadership roles. Lastly, discrimination on the basis of gender needs to be completely eliminated, particularly in relation to family and caring responsibilities. Okay, so now we'll take a look at a case study and highlight whether or not gender equality is being promoted or obstructed in this instance. So we've got Lucy and Mark. They're both applying for sales positions at Orange Inc. They have similar levels of experience and performance. Mark is successful and obtains a full-time position, while Lucy only wants to work part-time to manage her family responsibilities. She successfully obtains a part-time position. Orange Inc. pays Lucy a part-time salary. However, Lucy realizes that if she were working full-time hours, she would not be earning as much as Mark. It is clear that this is an example of gender pay inequality, as Lucy is earning less per hour than Mark, even though she's performing the same work, has the same skill set, same experience levels, and the same performance history. So what actually is the gender pay gap? Well, the gender pay gap is the difference between women's and men's average weekly full-time equivalent earnings expressed as a percentage of men's earnings. The graph depicted on the present slide compares the average weekly earnings between men, represented in the orange, and women, represented in the red, in a variety of different age groups within Australia. It is evident that across all age groups, women are paid significantly less than men. The most recent available data regarding Australia's gender pay gap is depicted in this line graph on the present slide. It displays Australia's current gender pay gap as shown as a percentage. Currently, Australia's pay gap sits at 17.3%. However, this figure has fluctuated between 15 and 19% over the past 2 decades. Australia's gender pay gap sat at 16.2% in 1994 and dropped down to 14.9% in 2004. However, over the past decade, the gender pay gap has alarmingly increased again. Here are a few statistics regarding Australia's existing gender pay gap. On average, women earn $1,325.10 a week, while men earn nearly $300 more at $1,602.80 a week. In terms of the gender pay gap in different industries, the highest is in the financial and insurance service sector, with a staggering 30.3% gender pay gap. In contrast, the lowest is in the public administration and safety sector, with a modest 7.7%. In terms of differences in the pay gap between states, Western Australia is the highest, almost sitting at 25%, while South Australia is the lowest, with 10.3%. In 2006, Australia ranked 15th in the Global Gender Pay Gap Index. However, our ranking has worsened as time has progressed, as we currently sit at 36, placing us below developing countries such as Rwanda and Mozambique. There is indisputable evidence that in Australia, women are still underpaid relative to men doing the same work, yet only a quarter of large businesses have conducted a gender pay gap analysis, and only 20% have a gender equality strategy in place. In Australia, there are certain obligations that employers should adhere to. In accordance with the Fair Work Act, the Fair Work Commission can make an equal remuneration order requiring certain employees to be provided equal remuneration for work of equal or comparable value. Under the Workplace Gender Equality Act, all non-public sector employers with 100 or more employees in their corporate structure are required to report to the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. The report must be lodged annually and include a workplace profile that is accessible to employees, unions, and shareholders. Lastly, anti-discrimination legislation makes it unlawful for an employer to discriminate on the grounds of sex in regards to the terms and conditions of employment provided to employees. This includes pay and other benefits. The gender pay gap is widely considered to be a globally persistent phenomenon. In a majority of countries, women's wages represent between 70 and 90% of men's wages, with even lower ratios in some Asian and Latin American countries. Progress in reducing the gender pay gap is slow in Europe and Central Asia. In certain countries, there's even been evidence of an increase in the pay gap. In the United States, the pay gap is also very persistent and has only declined slightly. In Latin American countries, the size of the gap, as well as an approximate trend towards its growth or reduction, vary. Across African countries, the informal and unpaid work of women is especially widespread, hence there is little official data available concerning the pay gap. The graph on this slide depicts the gender pay gap in numerous countries expressed as percentages. It is a visual comparison between Australia and other developed nations. Surprisingly, New Zealand is ranked the best with the lowest gender pay gap. It begs the question, why does Australia have such a much larger pay gap when we are neighbours with New Zealand and share many of the same policies and laws? The graph indicates that South Korea has the largest gender pay gap, sitting at 36.6%. The gender pay gap is influenced by a number of interrelated work, family, and societal factors, including stereotypes about the work that women and men should do, and the way women and men should engage in the workforce. Other factors that contribute to the gender pay gap include women and men working in different industries and different jobs, so this is referred to as industrial segregation, and occupational segregation. Historically, female-dominated industries and jobs have attracted lower wages than male-dominated industries and jobs. There's a lack of women in senior positions and a lack of part-time or flexible senior roles. Differences in education, work experience, and seniority. Both direct and indirect discrimination. The under-evaluation of skills in industries and areas where women predominate. Women's lack of access to work-based training. Different levels of eligibility for discretionary payments, such as over-award payments, bonuses, and performance pay. And lastly, inflexible organizational structures that restrict the employment prospects of workers with family responsibilities. Here are a few effects that the gender pay gap has on an individual level, on the economy, and on society as a whole. Firstly, financial stress. As women are earning less than men, previous debt that they once had is now taking longer to pay off. The gender pay gap causes poor health. This is both physical and mental health. The gender pay gap is detrimental to economic growth. The gender pay gap has potential to increase unemployment rates. The gender pay gap reinforces stereotypical gender norms. The gender pay gap reduces elderly women to likely face future poverty due to a pension gap. The gender pay gap causes reliance on social welfare. And the gender pay gap will likely result in women continuing to choose career paths in lower paying fields. So the question can be asked, will women ever be properly catered for by the state? And will they ever be repaid for their endured economic hardship? Well, if the current rate of change continues, the economic gap between men and women will not close before the year 2133. Evidently, much greater efforts at a much faster rate are required in order to repay women and close the worldwide gender pay gap. The United Nations has preserved many human rights in international human rights documents. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted in 1948, forms the basis of these documents. In accordance with Article 1, all humans are born free and equal in dignity and human rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. In accordance with Article 23, Section 1, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favourable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. Section 2 of Article 23 states that everyone without any discrimination has the right to equal pay for equal work. The United Nations deals with many aspects of human rights and other international issues. Several specialized departments and agencies have been established within the United Nations to deal with specific concerns relating to women. The Commission on the Status of Women is an intergovernmental body that forms part of the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. 45 members meet annually to evaluate the progress on gender equality, identify challenges, set global standards, and formulate concrete policies to promote gender equality and the advancement of women worldwide. The United Nations Development Fund for Women, commonly known as UNIFEM, is a specialized agency of the United Nations which works with national governments to promote women's empowerment and gender equality. UNIFEM's mandate is based on international women's rights documents, particularly CEDAW and the Beijing Platform for Action. The Division for the Advancement of Women, or DAW, is part of the UN Secretariat and specializes in issues concerning the status of women. It is the major part of the UN bureaucracy that advocates for the improvement of the status of women of the world and the achievement of their equality with men. The United Nations has established numerous treaties that protect the rights of women. An international human rights treaty, often referred to as a convention, is a collection of human rights standards that has been put into the form of an agreement between different countries. The Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, also known as CEDAW, was adopted in 1979 by the United Nations General Assembly and entered into force on the 3rd of September 1981. Australia has been a party to CEDAW since the 17th of August 1983. CEDAW has often been described as an international Bill of Rights for women. Enshrined within its preamble and 30 articles are key principles of equality and an agenda for national action to end discrimination against women. It is based on the belief that basic human rights include the true equality of men and women. As of November 2008, 185 countries are parties to CEDAW. Regarding equal pay, Article 11 requires the elimination of discrimination in employment, so as to ensure that women have the right to work, the right to the same training and employment opportunities as men, and the right to receive equal pay for work of equal value. Women must also have access to the same benefits and allowances as men, especially in relation to retirement and incapacity to work. Other relevant conventions include the Convention on the Political Rights of Women, 1953, and the Declaration of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, 1967. Here are some benefits associated with closing the worldwide gender pay gap. They are divided into benefits for the workplace and benefits for society as a whole. In terms of society as a whole, closing the gender pay gap will create a more equally cohesive society, while simultaneously promoting social justice. Closing the pay gap would result in improved economic independence and promote sustainable economic growth. Closing the gap will also result in a reduction of poverty. Regarding the workplace, closing the gap will achieve fairness and create a productive, motivated workplace. It would also attract top talent and improve staff retention. Closing the gap can reduce expenses and inspire consumer confidence. Performance is likely to be enhanced and result in an overall increase in national productivity and competitiveness. The question is often asked, are women capable of producing the same quality of work as their male counterparts? It is often argued by some men that no, women cannot, as their skill set and abilities are inferior. Well, I've included pictures on this slide of women throughout the world in different societies who have challenged stereotypical gender norms and are currently fulfilling high-profile senior roles across numerous different industries. These women would collectively argue that yes, women can produce the same quality of work, if not better. So we've got the likes of Oprah Winfrey. We've got Julia Gillard, the first female Prime Minister of Australia, the first of her kind. We've got the current First Lady Michelle Obama. We've got the former US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. We've got potentially the first ever female President of the United States of America, Hillary Clinton, which would be absolutely monumental if she were elected. We've got Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany. We've got Melinda Gates, Caitlyn Jenner, Gina Rinehart, who's Australia's richest woman. We've got Janet Yellen, the Chair of the Federal Reserve of the United States of America. We've got country pop music megastar Taylor Swift, and of course the Queen of England, Elizabeth II. These women collectively would 110% say that they are more than capable of producing the same, or if not better results as men, and therefore should be paid the same. Now we're going to take a look into the future and assess what both local and international governments should be doing in order to prevent the gender pay gap from growing any further, and how they can potentially abolish it altogether. With regards to education, there should be a focus on getting more girls interested in maths and science, and boys more interested in reading. This can be done, for example, by removing the gender bias in curricula and raising awareness of the likely consequences of male and female choices of fields of study in their careers and earnings. Apprenticeships should be used to encourage women who have completed their science and math studies to work in scientific fields. Schools need to be made safer and more affordable for girls in developing countries. With regards to strengthening laws, governments should reform legal frameworks and ensure their enforcement to remove any obstacles to gender equality. They need to prohibit discrimination, combat all forms of pay discrimination, uphold the notion of equal pay for work of equal value, and provide economic support and incentives for individuals, families, and communities to change discriminatory attitudes. With regards to employment, the provision of affordable, good quality childcare for all parents and paid maternity leave for mothers in employment is dire. There needs to be a greater encouragement of more equal sharing of parental leave. For example, this can be done by reserving part of paid leave entitlements for the exclusive use of fathers. Cultural barriers and stereotyping of women's roles in society, business, and the public sector need to be addressed. Countries should introduce targets and measures to monitor progress of female representation on the boards of listed companies. It can be said that there are high hopes for Gen Y, as Australian women are greatly outnumbering men in university graduation stats. So the question can be asked, will we ever see a future reversal of the gender pay gap? In conclusion, it can be said that women's rights are human rights. Now, these rights are preserved by the United Nations and the numerous treaties and conventions that they have created over time. Women are more than capable of producing the same quality of work as their male counterparts, and therefore should receive the same pay. The gender pay gap is a worldwide persistent phenomenon, and some countries have managed to control it, however, others have seen increases as time has progressed. Swift and immediate action is required at both local and international levels in order to close the gender pay gap. Okay, so to wrap up my presentation today, I've prepared a word sleuth for the class to complete. So there are 12 words to be found throughout that are relating to the topic of the gender pay gap, and the first to do so will receive a prize. However, conditions of the activity will be explained in more detail on the next slide. So here's where it gets interesting, because I've included a few conditions regarding the word sleuth. So both men and women in the class have the same amount of time to complete the word search. So I've given you 5 minutes to do so to find all 12 words. However, the prize for completing the word search will not be the same for men and women. If a male student completes first, he will receive 3 chocolate bars, where if a female completes first, she will be rewarded with 1 chocolate bar. Interesting. So the question is, do you still want to participate knowing that my activity is discriminatory and somewhat promoting gender inequality? I'd just like to thank you for watching and listening to my presentation today. I hope that you've gained some insight into the very real and very controversial topic that is the worldwide gender pay gap. Now, this final slide just includes a list of references that I sourced to help me in producing this presentation. Thank you.